Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cinema Mancuso, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, entertainment, and give you my thoughts. If you join us live, super happy to have you. If at any point you have any questions or comments about any of the topics I'm going to be covering, feel free to drop them in the live chat. I always try my best to keep an eye on it. I always try to read anything that you put in there. So if you want to have a little shout out, a gratuitous little shout out, drop it in the live chat. If you haven't already, please like this video, this live stream. It really helps with engagement and the algorithm and people, finding the channel. And if you haven't already, why not subscribe, right? Because I'm trying to grow this channel, grow this community as best I can. If you watch this after the fact, still super happy to have you. By the time you're watching this, there should be time codes down in the description, so you can kind of jump around at your leisure. We stream this show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and same deal as before. If you haven't already, please like this video, and do not forget to subscribe. Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past week. Total domestic box office, a little under 280 million, which was just a 7% drop. The reason why this week is so close to the previous week is because I don't do just the weekends, I do the week totals. And obviously this last week, the Monday was not a normal Monday, it was Memorial Day. Not just the weekend, but Memorial Day exactly. So that definitely helped give some movies like a little bit of a, I don't want to say a bump, but like helped it hold a lot better than it maybe would have otherwise, right? But this week was primarily dominated by older films, and by older I just mean things that have already been released. It's not its first week. The best performing new movie was the new Karate Kid movie, Karate Kid Legends. Brought in a little over 20 million, which fell between my projections, but definitely below my target of 26 million. Critics don't really like this movie all that much. Audiences seem to like it quite a bit, though. But it'll be interesting to see. Will that translate into staying power? My guess is no, right? Because again, the Karate Kid brand, I feel like it's just not strong enough to it's just not relevant anymore, unfortunately, right? Or not even unfortunately. It was a good movie, and they've just made sequel after sequel after sequel, and I don't think audiences really care all that much anymore. So, it's worldwide. It's made a little over 46 million off of a $45 million budget. So it's crossed that initial threshold of the budget. But ideally, we would want to see it get to somewhere around 90 million to really break even in a meaningful way. But again, the box office, just like the lineup, is just going to get more crowded and crowded as we keep going. So, it's the jury's still out how this is going to do, but it's a solid, it's a fair opening. I wouldn't say it's even solid. It's a fair opening, but what will really be telling is that second week drop, right? Also opening this week, Bring Her Back, the horror kind of follow-up from the directors behind Talk to Me, right, which was kind of a, sleek cult status movie, kind of a sleeper hit, if you will. I think that was 2 summers ago. From Australian, I think they were YouTubers first, and then they became like film directors, which is so encouraging, right? This brought in a little over 7 million, which again fell within the projections, though did fall below my target of 8, but obviously it was not as big of as a gap, right? Only like 1 million short of that target. Though, it'll be one of those things where hopefully the word of mouth, because critics seem to really like it. Audiences don't like it quite as much. And I'm going to do a little bit of live research here to see what did audiences like Talk to Me. Yes, they gave it, Talk to Me has an 83% in terms of the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. So, I guess not that far off from this, right? Because what is it, 79%? It cost $15 million to make this movie. So, it's still not even at that threshold, let alone getting to 30 million. So, it'll really depend on, can this sustain itself? Can it kind of be like, Talk to Me? That again was kind of a sleeper hit. Let me see here. Yeah, so it cost $4.5 million. Talk to Me, and made $92 million. Right, so huge success. Is this gonna have that same Can lightning strike twice? That still remains to be seen, right? But again, like I mentioned before, this week was primarily dominated with films that have already been released. And of course, holding on to its number one spot, the 2025 remake of Lilo and Stitch. This hurts, right? So, because I have not seen this, but I was already not enthused because it just looked so soulless and uninspired. But everything I've heard about this movie just makes my blood boil about, like, story changes that they've made, thematic changes that they've made. And I'm not like a source material purist, but if you're going to change something, especially something that worked so well, you have to have a really good reason or justification. I feel like a lot of the changes they made were just changes to make changes, just to give it some kind of differentiation. Again, critics like it fine enough, but audiences seem to really, really like it, at least just general audiences. In its second week now, it brought in this second week. Again, this is including Memorial Day, that Monday. So, again, a little bit skewed, but this second week, bringing in a little under 133 million. Only a 9% drop, which is just a little bit lower than the week total drop. If you look worldwide here, 613 million north of that, off of just a $100 million budget, which, again, I remember remarking, that's like a pretty cheap budget for a movie like this, all things considered. But then I realized it's really just Stitch, which admittedly he looks good in the sense that, like, I don't think he's designed well in live action. He looks like a lot creepier, but he looks photorealistic. Like the rendering on his fur is good and things like that. But otherwise, there's not a lot of VFX from my understanding because they cut Gantu. There's a lot of stuff. It's like it's a lot of front-loaded VFX work with all the stuff in the like the sci-fi parts before they get to Hawaii. But from my understanding, they cut Captain Gantu, and Jumba and Pleakley are predominantly played by live-action humans as like a disguise to save money, right, on this budget. But considering how much it costs versus how much it's made worldwide, this is a smashing success. And once again, Hollywood, specifically the Walt Disney Company, is going to learn the wrong lessons from this, right? Look at that, over 500% return in its second week. This movie was so frustrating, even just to hear about. My fiance Viviana and I rewatched the original film. Oh my god. It gets every time I watch it. I watch it like every couple of years, and every time I watch it, it gets better. Like, this is a 9 out of 10 movie. I used to not like it that much as a kid, but I think it's just because it made me uncomfortable because of, like, the emotional kind of complexity of, like, the situation that they're in. But as an adult, it's just like, it's probably one of the best Disney movies that has ever been made, right? This movie, not so much. It's going to make a lot of money. It's going to have zero cultural impact. Also continuing into its second week, holding its second place spot, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. I think it's the seventh or 8th Mission Impossible movie. Critics liked it pretty well. Audiences really like it. Brought in this week about 58 million. So again, only a 7% drop, so it kind of held exactly with the rest of the week. But unlike Lilo and Stitch, which is a massive profit right now, Mission Impossible is still in the negative zone, right? Because it sounds like a sci-fi thing. Isn't Superman the Phantom Zone? The Phantom Zone, the negative zone. Because this is technically a two-parter with Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. But the budgets for both of those films were astronomical because, and this is like good on a human level, but it's obviously bad for business. When COVID happened, they were filming and they shut everything down, but they kept paying the crew, right? Otherwise, they'd be like out of work and everything. So that is what accounts for such a mammothly expensive budget. Which again, on a human level, like, that is so beautiful and commendable. But it's going to be a question, is this movie going to make money, right? Like, is this going to... It's going to cross the 400 mark. The question will be, can it have legs? Can it sustain itself? And I'm a little dubious about that because again, we're really going to start getting into the weeds here. So I'm just going to take a quick look here at, the next couple of big movies. We have, like, the John Wick spin-off Ballerina coming next week. Or this Friday, exactly. Then the next week we have the How to Train Your Dragon movie. Then the week after that, 28 Years Later. Like, so, and then after that, Megan 2.0 and an F1 movie. So there's going to be a lot of competition. Oh, and then the first week of July, Jurassic World, the new Jurassic World, and then Spider-Man. So it's like week after week, like there's gonna be a lot of competition. So can this get to 800 million worldwide? I just don't think so. I just don't see that happening for this movie. And again, like that's such a big amount, that's such a large amount of money to have to hit. But that's what happens when you have a budget so large, right? Let's see what else. Also continuing into its second week, we have The Last Rodeo. Again, one of these like movies that clearly maybe should have just gone direct to, would have just gone straight to video or streaming before, but now they're like, oh, streaming sucks, it's not a good business model, we have to release everything in theaters again. This dropped from 6th to 8th place. Critics, again, were kind of lukewarm on it. Audiences really like it, because, again, it's just kind of like what you would find flipping through channels. It actually had a 1% jump, so good for The Last Rodeo. And it's made a little less than $11 million off an $8 million budget. So, crossed that at first threshold, but let's see if it can get to 16. But seeing as it opened at 6 and is already down to 8, I'm a little skeptical of that. Still here in the top 5, Final Destination Bloodlines, holding its 3rd place spot now in its 3rd week. Critics and audiences really like this. From my understanding, it's kind of like a subversive, tongue-in-cheek horror film, whereas like some of the other Final Destination films really kind of lost sight of what made them interesting for a lot of people. And this is also profitable, right? It's fairly expensive considering a horror film. Because horror films are usually in the single-digit millions, maybe double, maybe like into the tens or even the 20s. $50 million for a horror movie is a lot, right? Because, you know, you're going to be limited in how much money you can make, because if you notice, what's the biggest movie right now? Lilo and Stitch. And it's a family movie. So not only can more people go, but you know, you're not going to have a lot of single ticket people. Like a lot of adults who are going to go are families, and they're going with their spouse and their kids, minimum 1 kid, if not 2 or 3 or how many, right? Whereas a horror film self-selects for mostly adults or at least teenagers. So there's just going to be a lower ceiling of how much money you can make. And again, this isn't going crazy. It's only made about 230-ish million worldwide. But again, it's all a numbers game. Since it was only cost $50 million, this is definitely within the profitable zone, I would say. What also is in the profitable zone, and again, it's also about a numbers game, is Sinners, right? So Sinners, the Ryan Coogler film, his finally returning to original films following his stint doing Black Panther movies. Critics and audiences adore this. A lot of people are already saying this is one of, if not the best movie of the year so far. I saw this actually one of the films I broke my like little bit of a hiatus to go to the theaters to see. I thought it was really great. A little messy, but really interesting big swings. And the legs on this has just been really strong, making, you know, just making money week after week. I mean, it's been here for, this is its 7th frame now. And off of a $90 million budget, it's made almost $350 million worldwide. And again, I always say this, and I don't mean to be reductive, but ostensibly a horror film, an original horror film led by a predominantly black cast, doing this well, is just so cool to see. And I hope, you know, this inspires Hollywood to take more chances like this, right? And there's not really anything else to really write home about here. I mean, Thunderbolts is still here, obviously, but it's just kind of making whatever money it can. It just barely crossed over into the $360 million. I think last week I was like, oh, it's going to cross that doubling the budget soon, and it has done that. So I think we could safely assume it has broken even. But again, compared to the MCU of the past, that, you know, breaking even was a, you know, like that would not have been the metric that you would measure the success of a film in the MCU, right? But I do have to mention here, really, I misspoke about Lilo and Stitch, but it's the same thing applies. I said Lilo and Stitch is the best performing film here, and it's because it's a family film. There's actually another film that's doing slightly better, which is a Minecraft movie, and it's 9th frame now, dropped from 8th to 10th place. Again, critics, you know, did not like this movie. Audiences really did. It kind of became a meme. It's made $948 million worldwide off of a $150 million budget. And again, the question is this going to hit $1 billion? I don't know, because the growth of movies is usually logarithmic, right? So like the longer you go, like the less and less you're going to make, and you just kind of flatline. So I don't know. I'm almost like of the minds like if a Minecraft movie crosses $1 billion, there's something wrong with our society. I'm just saying. I'm sorry. And then looking ahead to this upcoming week, I mentioned it earlier, but we have the John Wick spinoff Ballerina, starring Ana de Armas, who I feel like is too cute to be an assassin. Like, I don't just mean she's pretty, but she's like has like a cute little doll baby face. I feel like I don't know how that would work, but this is projected to make around 30 to 40 million. I'm gonna put the target around 36. I've admittedly never seen any of the John Wick movies, but I know they're like beloved. But I wonder how well this will do as a spinoff to John Wick, right? Like, I mean, there's been 4 mainline films. How much do people like this franchise to go support a spinoff that I guess maybe features John Wick, but like as like he's not the main character, right? So I don't know how this is gonna play with audiences, especially considering the last one came out, it feels like a while ago, because it was like during COVID, right? Wasn't it like 2022 or something like that? Let's see, John Wick 4. When did that come? Yeah, 2023. Okay, wow, it feels so much longer ago. So we'll just have to see how this plays with audiences. And then we also have Wes Anderson's new joint, if you will, the Phoenician Scheme. I guess this has already maybe been out briefly, like in the limited release, but this is it going wide across America. Only projected to make around 7 to 11 million. I'm gonna put the target around 9. Again, the films like this aren't really expected to make a shit ton of money, but because they're more awards vehicles or prestige vehicles. And also, they don't usually open big, but I think they tend to kind of have, again, that consistency of holding out week to week to week. So we'll see where the chips fall on that. I'm not really the biggest. I really don't like Wes Anderson films. I've only seen like one that I really really like. What was it? The French Dispatch, which I guess people don't really like all that much, but that was like my favorite one that I've seen by Wes. Okay, before moving on, I just want to give a quick plug to another YouTube channel I recently started earlier this year called Replay Rewind. 1,000 video games across 50 years of gaming history. Can I play them all before I die? Well, we're going to find out. This is my attempt to play through all of these games one by one, many of which I've never played before, to kind of track the development of gaming as a medium. It's already been a lot of fun to do. It would really mean the world to me if you could go check that out. You can find the link to that channel in the description down below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 1. So Taylor Swift has purchased the master rights to her first 6 studio albums from Shamrock Capital. This is for an undisclosed sum of money, but I think I can, confidently say it is probably in a denomination of a metric shit ton, right? It was originally rumored to be, there were rumors flying around that the number could be anywhere from 600 million to $1 billion, but sources have reported that figure is quote-unquote highly inaccurate. So I'm not sure how inaccurate, I mean, let's say highly inaccurate, but like, are we talking, okay, it was 90 million or was it 500 million, right? Was it just a little bit below that or was it substantially below? And this doesn't just include the rights to the albums, but it includes the rights to anything related to the album. So, imagery, concert films, poster, anything that was associated with or had the branding of these 6 albums. The Swift plans to reissue these albums, but she probably doesn't even need to do that because they've already been seeing a major bump in streams on platforms like Spotify. Swift put out like a big lengthy message to fans about this, but I've taken just kind of like a little blurb here. Just to kind of give you a sense of where she was coming from here in this announcement, saying, quote, "To say this is my greatest dream come true is actually being pretty reserved about it. All I've ever wanted was the opportunity to work hard enough to be able to one day purchase my music outright with no strings attached, no partnership, with full autonomy. I will be forever grateful to everyone at Shamrock Capital for being the first people to ever offer this to me. My first tattoo just might be a huge shamrock in the middle of my forehead," end quote. So again, very, very grateful. Getting very grateful response from Taylor Swift. So let's take a step back here because some of you might have some familiarity with this, but first I want to explain how copyright works, specifically music copyright. So for a song, any song, let's just say it's a Taylor Swift song, Shake It Off. For a song like that, there are two separate copyrights. There is a copyright to the composition, right? So like the essence of the song, the idea of the song, whether that be the instrumentation or more specifically the notes, the actual composition, musical composition. That's one set of rights. But then there's also the rights to the recording, the original master recording. And most of the time, one entity owns both, but not always, right? And oftentimes, the rights to the composition are cheaper than the rights to the recording, right? Because the composition is easily copyable, whereas the recording is one of a kind, right? Obviously, you make copies in terms of selling it, but it's not. There is only one "Shake It Off" by Taylor Swift, at least that version of it, right? So this is why whenever you watch a movie, especially like animated movies for kids, it'll feature a cover of some like iconic song. And you're like, why is this not just being sung by the Beatles or the Roll or whoever it is? And it's because that's cheaper usually. To make a cover version of that than to license the original recording for the film, right? So looking at Taylor Swift specifically, right? This rights dispute, the seeds of this saga, if you will, goes all the way back to the very beginning of Taylor's career. So in 2006, she signs, I think she was only like 15 or something, which is crazy. She signs a record deal with the label Big Machine Records, and I believe she was one of, if not the first, musician under their umbrella. This deal was a 13-year recording deal, and the label got ownership. I think this was maybe 2005 actually, but the label got ownership of the masters of the work she produced during that time, in exchange for a cash advance, and that's pretty standard. Not even standard, but like that, those terms specifically. But this idea that a lot of times artists are struggling, right? They don't have a lot of money, so they will take the cash advance in exchange for not having the rights to their music, right? Because they need the money now, right? They don't want to wait, on the hope that they become successful. So during this 13-year period, Taylor obviously did a bunch of work, but primarily produced her first 6 albums. Self-titled Taylor Swift, Fearless, Speak Now, Red, 1989, and Reputation. Reputation, I think, came out in 2017, right? Yeah, 2017. In 2018, Swift tried to negotiate the purchase of the rights to the master recordings, since her contract was going to be expiring by the end of the year. Big Machine was kind of touch and go about it. I think I read somewhere that they were willing to do it if and only if Taylor re-signed with the label, essentially giving them rights to new albums. And I think I maybe read somewhere where it was basically like, it wasn't even just, okay, you sign and then you get the rights to all these old albums. It would be like, if you make another album with us, then you get the rights to the first album, and that like the old first album, and then you do another, you get the next one, and it's like you make 6 more to get the old 6, but now you don't have the new 6. So no agreement was reached. The contract expires. Swift signs with Republic Records, and as part of that deal, she gets the full rights to her music going forward. With albums like Lover and all the COVID projects that she did. But there was still these other 6 albums that were kind of just floating out there, right? That she didn't have the full rights to. Then enters Scooter Braun. So Scooter Braun, through his private equity firm, I think Ithaca Holdings, acquires Big Machine Records in 2019 for something north of $300 million. He's an American. Wikipedia describes him as an American media proprietor, talent manager, and businessman. And he's famous for managing several music artists, including Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, Demi Lovato, and Kanye West. Right. So he's pretty reputable in that world. Right. But, what ended up happening is that he's a very controversial figure. And Taylor Swift was not happy about this, right? First off, that anyone besides her was able to purchase the rights to these masters, right? Because she argued she tried to buy the masters, but Big Machine kind of more or less blocked it or kind of dragged their feet and hemmed and hawed, right? She also has described Braun as a, quote, incessant manipulative bully, end quote, excuse me. Again, apart, among his many kind of discretions, if you will, he was involved with the Kanye West music video Famous that featured Kanye in a bed with a bunch of people, with wax figurines of famous people, and one of them was like a naked Taylor Swift, which she was not happy about, right? And she also claimed that, once Scooter Braun bought these rights, they made it difficult for her to even perform her own music. Like, there was some story about her performing at the Country Music Awards or something like that, country music video or something. And she said to the public, they're making it hard or not even letting me play some of these older songs. And then they kind of acquiesced later. But you can see how this would create a problem, right? Eventually, Braun sells, I think, within the year, in 2020, Braun sells the Big Machine Records to Shamrock Holdings, which is a private equity firm, funnily enough, owned by the Disney estate, not Disney the company, but the Disney family. And they still maintain their claim to the rights to these masters. So Taylor, kind of given no other options, decides, in a very shrewd business decision, to re-record her old music under the label Taylor's Version. So she's done this for 4 of the 6 albums. The second through the second, third, fourth, and fifth albums. Fearless, Speak Now, Red in 1989. She has yet to do her self-titled debut album, nor has she done Reputation. And she's able to do this because technically she's covering her own songs as re-recordings. And to do a cover, you would just need to get the permission from the rights holder of the composition, which is herself, right? So she has the right to do this. And this proved to be wildly successful venture. These were very, very popular re-recordings because not only were they re-recordings, and the Taylor Swift fan base obviously is so infamous. I was going to say iconic, maybe infamous. The Swifties are I saw a funny tweet that was about this, being wow, Taylor Swift spent all this money to buy her masters, but imagine what that money could have done to help society, which is true. But then someone was you don't understand, she is doing this for society. Taylor Swift is the only thing standing between millions of white women and QAnon, right? And it's the same kind. I don't mean to disparage Swifties, but there is a fanaticism. Really, they really put the fan in fanaticism, right? So these re-recordings were super popular and successful because fans wanted to support her in her endeavor against Scooter Braun and then later, whoever was holding these rights that won't sell them to her. But they often also featured bonus tracks unearthed or reimagining of songs. That most iconic, I think, was the 10-minute version of All Too Well for Taylor's version of Red. This was just a wildly successful again a very shrewd business move. And by doing this, she now owns the rights to these recordings. So it allows her to license these versions and earn revenue from these songs. So, licensing them to movies or TV shows or things like that. Whereas, she wasn't able to get any royalties. Or I don't even want to say royalties, but she wasn't in control of licensing of any of the prior recordings. So this really is a long time coming. And because Taylor Swift is the biggest star on the planet. She has seemingly limitless money and even more influence. And I have a quote here from Adrian Horton of The Guardian writing in an article. It's kind of a big blurb, but I think it really captures, the ethos of the situation and why this is kind of important. Adrian Horton here at The Guardian says, quote, "It is also a victory that for once in this era Let me start over. It is also a victory that, for once in this era, feels bigger than Swift herself. Swift owning her masters is a small step towards transparency and artistic integrity in the music industry, and one made possible by her immense wealth and power, like I mentioned before. The fact that we're even talking about ownership of master recordings, that millions of music listeners now question the business standard of recording industry contracts, is a testament to the power Swift can wield when she chooses a worthy target. This is Swift in her best crusader mode. Grounded in the work, clear-eyed on the stakes, speaking as a songwriter in perhaps the one arena where she remains an underdog with something to fight for. Though often overshadowed by gossip and her personal life in ways both self-inflicted and expected by a culture that loves to see women fail, her flexing of her exceptional clout over the music industry for artists' rights is one of her most enduring fights, end quote. And you gotta give Taylor Swift credit that she really does stand up for artists as a vocation and profession. I remember when I was in high school, it was a big deal that she pulled all of her music off of Spotify because of the way that Spotify shared revenue. And she was like, it's not just for me. Like, I don't need the extra money because, like, I'm Taylor Swift. But, you know, I'm making a stand for all artists because, like, if I'm losing money, imagine, like, the up and coming musician who is not really making much of any money, right? And I have another big blurb here, but this is from Taylor, from her announcement of buying the masters, saying, quote, "I'm trying to gather my thoughts into something coherent, but right now my mind is just a flashback sequence of all the times I daydreamed about, wished for, and pined away for a chance to get to tell you this news. All the times I was this close," she writes like with multiple eyes, "all the times I was this close, reaching out for it, only for it to fall through. I almost stopped thinking it could ever happen, after 20 years of having the carrot dangled and then yanked away. But that's all in the past now. I've been bursting into tears of joy at random intervals ever since I found out that this is really happening. I really get to say these words. All of the music I've ever made now belongs to me. I'm extremely heartened by the conversations this saga has reignited within my industry among artists and fans. Every time a new artist tells me they negotiated to own their master recordings in their record contract because of this fight, I'm reminded of how important it was for all of this to happen. Thank you for being curious about something that used to be thought of as too industry-centric for broad discussion. You'll never know how much it means to me that you cared. Every single bit of it counted and ended us up here," end quote. Scooter Braun, in response to this, said, quote, "I am happy for her," end quote. So keeping it very brief. So I'm very happy for Taylor. Again, her music quality can be a little uneven, especially as of late, but she's really I think she's like one of, if not the most successful music artist of all time. And she deserves it in a lot of ways. Again, her music can sometimes be touch and go, but some of her tracks are some of just the best songs ever. So, all power to Taylor Swift. Very happy for her. It'd be great if, I could make more money. I own all the rights to Notes on the News. So if this ever blows up, I own 100% of the rights to this. Okay, so I want to give another plug to the podcast, that I do with my fiance Viviana, called Now That's What I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's been a lot of fun this season. We're doing The Muppets, which is a lot of fun. It's a hoot, if you will. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. You can also just find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to podcast. You can also just find us in the link in the description down below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 2. So HBO has revealed the principal child cast for its upcoming Harry Potter reboot series. We've already found out the main adult cast of people like Snape or Dumbledore, but we're now finally getting to know who's going to be playing the main trio, right? And this is going to be Dominic McLaughlin as Harry Potter. Center, obviously. I mean, I don't need to tell you who in this picture is who, right? I think it's pretty obvious. Dominic McLaughlin hasn't really been in all that much. He's going to be in a couple upcoming series already. He's going to be in an upcoming comedy on Sky, which is like NBC Comcast's channel in the UK, a program on that channel called Grow, as well as being on an upcoming action adventure series for the BBC titled Gifted. Then you have Arabella Stanton as Hermione Granger, whose main claim to fame was she starred as she was Matilda in the Matilda musical on the West End, I think in 2023, 2024. And then we have Alastair Stout as Ron Weasley, and this is actually his first major role. So really cool for if you're part of the Alastair Stout family, right? I got a quote here from the showrunner Francesca Gardner and executive producer and director Mark Millard saying, quote, "After an extraordinary search led by casting directors Lucy Bevan and Emily Brockman, we are delighted to announce we have found our Harry, Hermione, and Ron. The talent of these three unique actors is wonderful to behold, and we cannot wait for the world to witness their magic together on screen. We would like to thank all the tens of thousands of children who auditioned. It's been a real pleasure to discover the plethora of young talent out there," end quote. So, take a step back, looking at Harry Potter, of course, this is the multimedia behemoth of a franchise. Though those dwindled a little bit, and I'll talk about that in a second, right? Of course, this originates as the iconic and wildly successful book series. There were 7 of them from 1997 to 2007, which then, of course, led to a semi-concurrent, right? Like, I think they started the films in 2001. So they were kind of making the movies not long after the respective books were coming out. In this film series, there was 8 films from 2001 to 2011. This also led to a prequel series, the Fantastic Beasts movies, with 3 films, but those were not very well received. The first one got okay reviews. It just kept getting worse and worse with every entry. But like I mentioned, the fandom kind of feels like it's dying down. As millennials get older, because this is such a millennial fixation, right? As millennials get older and are focused on other things, they're having kids, they have other things to do and worry about besides posting online about Harry Potter. As that starts to die down, Warner Brothers probably took a look around and went, shit, we need to revitalize this property, especially because they've invested so much with Universal in building like the Harry Potter Hogwarts area of their theme parks, right? So theoretically, this television series will allow for a more faithful adaptation of the original source material because it's longer, there'll be less that has to be left on the cutting room floor, right? But because of that, basically it's going to be like each book is going to be one season of this show, supposedly. This is going to be like a decade-long project, right? This is like a very long-term investment by Warner Brothers and HBO, right? And again, this casting is the result of a very intensive casting process. They auditioned something like 35,000 young actors since last fall with an open casting call, which I think was the right choice because you gotta just find someone like the original 3 of Daniel Radcliffe and Emma Watson and I always feel so bad for Ron Weasley. What's his name? Rupert Grint, right? Yeah, Rupert Grint. I knew that, but I didn't want to say it and then be wrong. But I should have been brave because I was right. You gotta find someone completely fresh. And not only do you want to find someone fresh, you almost need to like have a psychologist come on and like evaluate these kids. Because, again, this is a decade-long investment. And you could recast, but, it's gonna be a bad look if after 2 seasons you have to recast your Hermione or your Ron. You'll recast one of these characters because they kind of flame out or they have some kind of issue or something happens, right? So you really need to be particular. And the fact that those 8 films turned out as well as they did with those child actors maturing into really, really strong actors and seemingly being fairly well adjusted, all things considered, as adults, that was a miracle. So it's like, can lightning really strike? Can you really do it twice, right? But seeing all those other tens of thousands of child actors is not all for waste because, they can then Deadline notes that they can pull from those like runner-ups and other contenders for the rest of the child cast, like Draco Malfoy. Who's the one that I feel like is like the Charlie Brown of the Neville Longbottom, right? He's like the Charlie Brown of the Harry Potter universe. So this is exciting again to see that progress has actually been made. But will this series be any good? Like I've talked about this on this channel many times that I feel like again this could be really good, but it's in spite of its inception, not because of it. Because its inception, like I said, is rooted in like we need to do this to keep the brand alive. Because we're sitting on these rights. We've tried spin-offs, we've tried prequels with Fantastic Beasts. We've tried sequels with Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, the stage play, which is very financially successful, but like critics were kind of mixed on it. So they're kind of just like, we're just gonna go back to the drawing table, to the drawing board, right? There's the J.K. Rowling of it all. Her being so controversial with so many of her transphobic remarks and activities. But again, I think the big issue is like, what is this going to provide that the films didn't? And I guess, again, the best case that you can make is that, again, because it's longer, it won't have to cut as much. Which, okay, but again, it's still going to be a fairly conventional, it's still a live action adaptation of Harry Potter. My argument is that I think they should have done an animated version, which not only would be something different and new, and really find ways to use the medium of animation to bring this magical world to life, but also solves your problem with the child stars, right? Take something like Lilo and Stitch, which me and my fiance Vivian were just watching the other night, and the voice actress for Lilo is so good. I think Lilo is only supposed to be like Lilo age. How old is she supposed to? She's supposed to be like 6 years old, right? I believe the actress who voiced her was like 9, 10, 12 when they did it. So if it would be better if they did this, but cast older actors who like they could be like, okay, like they're a little bit older, a little bit more mature. We have an idea that like they're not gonna like flame out or like go insane, right? Because that's what you could do in animation, right? And so many kids in animation are voiced by adults. And you see the difference between the performance of Lilo in an animated movie. And again, I haven't seen the new Lilo and Stitch movie, but you like from the trailers, the actress who plays Lilo, I mean, like, God bless her, but she's like 6 years old in real life, or however old she is. She's not that good of an actor. She's like 6 years old. You know what I mean? So, you run the risk when you have actual children, because they just haven't had the experience or the time to develop their craft, their acting muscle, right? So, I really hope for the best with these kids. I hope they don't get bullied and they don't become like insane former child stars. I really hope that they can keep a good head on their shoulders, but I think there's a lot of responsibility on Warner Brothers and HBO's shoulders to do whatever they can to make sure that they are set up for success as human beings and not just use them like disposable, Kleenex. And then when they're done with them, go like, okay, we're done with you now. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 3. So over 500 members of the Broadway theater industry and community have signed an open letter to the Broadway League, the American Theater Wing, and the quote-unquote greater theater community, decrying Patti LuPone's recent comments about fellow Broadway actors Keisha Lewis and Audra McDonald. So here's a little excerpt from this open letter saying, quote, "Recently, Patti LuPone made deeply inappropriate and unacceptable public comments about two of Broadway's most respected and beloved artists, Keisha Lewis and Audra McDonald. In a published interview with The New Yorker, she referred to Keisha Lewis, a black woman and a 40-year veteran of the American stage, as a bitch. This language is not only degrading and misogynistic, it is a blatant act of racialized disrespect. It constitutes bullying, it constitutes harassment, it is emblematic of the microaggressions and abuse that people in this industry have endured for far too long, too often without consequence. Individuals, including Patti LuPone, who use their platform to publicly demean, harass, or disparage fellow artists, particularly with racial, gendered, or otherwise violent language, should not be welcomed at industry events, including the Tony Awards, fundraisers, and public programs." End quote. Wow. So that's very, very scathing, right? So a little bit about Patti LuPone. She's a 76-year-old American actress and singer. And when I was writing these notes, I was like, oh, is it really fair? Should I really be, like, do I really need to mention her age? Would I do that if it was a male actor? But I feel like it's important here because she's at the sunset of her career. You know what I mean? And I think that's important for this story. She's like an iconic Broadway performer who has been in a bajillion different stage productions, but most notably she was Eva Perón in Evita back in 1976. I believe she originated the role on Broadway. She was Rose in Gypsy in the revival in 2008, and she was also Joanne in the revival of Company back in 2022. And Patti LuPone is a very polarizing performer and a very polarizing personality. I've never quite liked her, I've never quite liked her singing style. But she's very iconic, right? Very idiosyncratic. Like, you know Patti LuPone when you hear it. I don't really like her Evita, her Ava Perón. I much prefer Julie Covington, in like the original concept album version of that character. But again, she's a very iconic presence and personality in Broadway history, in the community. And she's a firebrand, you know what I mean? She's been known to go off script during performances, even like yelling at people in the audience if like they're on their phone or something, like stopping a performance and start like breaking the fourth wall, yelling at people, you know, and she's very cantankerous and blunt, you know what I mean? You know, she always has been, but especially now that she's older, right? And she's like a fixture on the like the New Year's ball drop special with Andy Cohen and Anderson Cooper. She'll show up and she's always hilarious, right? But this kind of then dovetails into talking about the comments she made in the New Yorker. So she was getting this profile done by Michael Schulman, and this all has to do with an incident when she was performing in the play The Roommate with Mia Farrow last fall. And she complained about the noise coming next door from another Broadway production, Alicia Keys' musical Hell's Kitchen. Complaining about the amount of noise because it's a very loud, you know, musical. It's just in terms of the musical style, right? And the fact it's a musical, right? So if you're doing a straight play like The Roommate, you know, you're not going to have your own music drowning out music from next door, right? So I guess this whole situation eventually got handled and LuPone sent flowers. But Keisha Lewis, who was in Hell's Kitchen, characterized LuPone's complaints as bullying. In like an Instagram post saying, quote, "They're offensive," referring to these complaints. "They're offensive, they are racially microaggressive, they're rude, they're rooted in privilege. Referring to a predominantly black Broadway show as loud can unintentionally reinforce harmful stereotypes," end quote. And in response to this, Audra McDonald, again, another very prominent black Broadway star, right, responded to Lewis's Instagram video with a heart and hand clap emojis, right? So when Michael Schulman brings this up in the profile for the New Yorker, LuPone says about Audra McDonald, quote, "I thought you should know better. That's typical of Audra. She's not a friend," end quote. And similarly, LuPone talking about Keisha Lewis said, quote, "She's done 7 Broadway shows. I've done 31. Don't call yourself a vet, bitch," end quote. The New Yorker does clarify, though, that LuPone has done 28 shows and Lewis has done 10. So LuPone was exaggerating a little bit about herself and exaggerating about Lewis a little bit, right? And the Michael Schulman also notes in the profile piece, when asked about this, saying, quote, "She stared at me in silence for 15 seconds. Then she turned to the window and sighed. What a beautiful day," end quote. So clearly not really wanting to talk about it, or even more accurate, not feeling like this situation even deserves her breath to even talk about. So you can see why there was some blowback again, and some blowback is maybe an understatement. Again, over 500 members of the Broadway community signed this open letter, which of course led to Patti, if I can call her that, if I can address her by her first name, led to her apologizing. And I have a little blurb from her apology saying, quote, "For as long as I have worked in the theater, I have spoken my mind and never apologized. That is changing today. I am deeply sorry for the words I used during the New Yorker interview, particularly about Keisha Lewis, which were demeaning and disrespectful. I regret my flippant and emotional responses during this interview, which were inappropriate, and I am devastated that my behavior has offended others and has run counter to what we hold dear in this community. I made a mistake. I take full responsibility for it, and I am committed to making this right. Our entire theater community deserves better," end quote. That's all well and good. It kind of reads like someone else wrote it, right? Like, I feel like someone as such a firebrand as Patti LuPone does not apologize easily, does not back down easily. So with the speed at which this apology came out and the moral clarity of it, it reads to me like I don't feel like she wrote this, personally. But that being said, I feel like I'm as woke as they come. So let's just get that out of the way. If you're new to the channel, I am about as woke as they come. I'm part of the woke mob, right? I feel like this situation is a little overblown, right? And again, take this with a grain of salt. I am not black, I am not a woman, and I'm not a black woman. So, my opinion on this is valid, but it should not be the primary or the first opinion, right? So take all this with a grain of salt. So Patty's comments here are obviously not a good look, but she's rude and abrasive about everybody, right? Like, I don't know if these comments constitute, like when she's like, people are like, she called Keisha Lewis a bitch. She didn't call her a bitch like, she is a bitch. She just said, don't call yourself a vet, bitch, as people will do. Like, there's a big difference between that and saying, you are such a bitch. I feel like there's something different about that. And nevertheless, her making, I feel like the whole thing is overblown. I guess is the long and short of it. That, is it a microaggression? Perhaps. But I feel like it is rude and mean and petty. Is it racist? I don't think so. I think it could be fucking Les Miserables next door. And if it was so loud, she would be complaining about that as well. Right? That's I could be wrong, but that's my charitable read of the situation. But regardless, maybe this is kind of good that this happened, right? Because her making it a public apology, right? Even if she didn't write it. The fact that she sanctioned it, again, not only from someone who's so reputable and powerful in the industry, but someone who notoriously never, as she says in her apology, she's never apologized. She's always spoken her mind. So for her to, I guess, humble herself in that way is a great step for an industry that often protects powerful veterans, right? And the open letter kind of alludes to this idea, right? Saying, quote, no artist, producer, director, or leader, regardless of legacy or celebrity, should be allowed to weaponize their platform to belittle, threaten, or devalue others without consequence, end quote. So, I think the situation's a little bit overblown, but I think nevertheless it's really important, I think, for the industry to have moments like this so that, we as a society can be better. Because, Patti LuPone should not be this way. It is not good to be so cranky and mean-spirited all the time for decades. But at least she's consistent with that, right? Okay, just want to give another quick plug to another YouTube channel I have called Peter Squared, where I cover topics related to film, media, entertainment in a more structured video essay format. The video I have up right now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guessed it, I take a closer look at the Disney film Frozen, taking a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between using these cartoon versions of myself. It was a lot of fun to make. Hopefully it's a lot of fun to watch. Go comment and let me know why you disagree with everything I say in the video. You can find the link to that in the description down below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 4. So Billie Piper will be replacing Ncuti Gatwa, and I really apologize, I've never heard his name spoken aloud before. But she's going to be replacing him as Doctor Who. Piper put out a statement saying, quote, it's no secret how much I love this show, and I've always said I would love to return to the Whoniverse, which I didn't know that's what it was called. Return to the Whoniverse, as I have some of my best memories there. So to be given the opportunity to step back on that TARDIS one more time was just something I couldn't refuse. But who, how, why, and when, you'll just have to wait and see. Gatwa put out a statement, talking about his, the fact he's leaving the show as Doctor Who, saying, quote, this journey has been one that I will never forget and a role that will be part of me forever. There are no words to describe what it feels like to be cast as the Doctor, nor are there words to explain what it feels like to be accepted into this iconic role that has existed for over 60 years and is truly loved by so many across the globe. I've loved every minute of it, but now it is time to hand over the keys to that beloved blue box and let someone else take control and enjoy it every bit as much as I have. I'll truly miss it and forever be grateful to it and everyone that has played a part in my journey as the Doctor, end quote. And one final quote before I kind of move on here. We got a quote here from the showrunner of Doctor Who, Russell T Davies, saying, quote, Billie once changed the whole of television back in 2005, and now she's done it again. It's an honor and a hoot to welcome her back to the TARDIS, and quite how and why and who is a story yet to be told. After 62 years, the Doctor's adventures are only just beginning, end quote. So taking a look at Doctor Who as a whole here, of course, this is the iconic British science fiction television series, debuted back in 1963, and it had 26 seasons all the way up to 1989, and then ended. But then my generation knows it better for the rebooted series, which I don't even know if you call it a reboot because it's still like in the same continuity. It's like a continuation of that original 26 seasons. It was rebooted back in 2005, and it currently just wrapped up its 15th season of that new reimagined or continuation. And over those, what did Russell T Davies say? The 62 years, 15 different actors, I guess now 16, have portrayed the character of Doctor Who. Because obviously there's a need to recast eventually, non-diegetically, right? So how do you explain that in universe that the Doctor looks different? So the narrative reason is that the character of the Doctor goes through these like regeneration periods where they essentially are still the same entity or person or soul, if you will, but they regenerate into a new form that might have a slightly different personality. And again, this is like a very elegant way of justifying recasting the character. There's only been one woman, right? Jodie Whittaker. She was the 13th Doctor. Only one person of color, Ncuti Gatwa. And unfortunately, he's one of the shortest tenures in the series history, which is not a good look, right? There's also been one person who has been two different Doctors. David Tennant was both the 10th and the 14th Doctor. And the show is primarily, it's a BBC show from the UK. It's like a British institution, if you will. But Disney distributes it in the United States, I think, on Disney Plus, or at least it has the streaming rights to it. So where does Billie Piper fit into all this? So I guess she's a former child singer, which I did not know. She transitions into acting, and then she lands a role as Rose Tyler in the new rebooted Doctor Who, going back to the beginning of it in 2005. She was the companion alongside Christopher Eccleston's ninth Doctor, who is the shortest tenure of being Doctor Who, only one season. And then she was also the companion for David Tennant for those two first seasons of the reboot, and then left the show in 2006. And I guess for Doctor Who, the companion is like a core kind of part of the setup, that you have the Doctor and you have like a very specific person that he's going around doing his adventures with. She's Billie Piper's Rose is probably the most iconic companion in the series, at least the recent history of the series. So I don't want to say it makes sense, but you can understand the logic of why they're bringing Billie Piper back, who has already appeared or has returned as like little cameos or reappearances here and there. But now it seems she's the 16th Doctor, right? And reactions have been more bewildered than anything. I got some quotes here for you. I got some good, get your quotes, get your hot, fresh quotes here. Steve Hatcher, who runs Hoover's, WHOOVERS, a Doctor Who fan club, said, quote, "The question in the mind was, is it going to be a regeneration to a new Doctor, which it was, or is it just going to be a regeneration to black in an uncertain future? So I'm very relieved that they found a new Doctor, and she's a brilliant actor, and I'm sure that'll be terrific. So Doctor Who continues," end quote. Kind of recognizing the fact that the show has been kind of struggling a little, so there's questions of like, will it even continue, right? Another quote here from Brendan Noble, who runs the Sense Sphere YouTube channel, saying, quote, "I think we've just had what I would have called EastEnders in space. I am absolutely shocked, irritated, frustrated. People are contacting me now in absolute shock and horror at what's just happened," end quote. For context, EastEnders is like a very famous British soap opera, kind of like their version of Days of Our Lives or something like that. So kind of, if I guess to, not to put words in Brendan Noble's mouth, if Doctor Who has yet to jump the shark, it finally has, right? By having Billie Piper be the next Doctor. Another fan, Dan McLaughlin, said, quote, "There was an audible gasp when she came on, definitely." Sidebar, he's referring, I guess, like you could go see this season finale in theaters, so like a lot of people saw it in a group setting. Continuing the quote here, "There was maybe about 2 or 3 cheers, and someone behind me swore. Billie Piper's amazing, and Rose was a wonderful character, but you want something new now. You want to be excited. I love David Tennant in the 60th anniversary special, but bringing back characters loses its novelty if you just keep on bringing the old ones back all the time. It's lacking in original ideas," end quote. kind of touching on this idea of, people love this character and they love Billie Piper, but it's just like, sometimes things need to end for them to be meaningful. So, like, if you miss Billie Piper, just go back and watch the old episodes, right? Another quote here from TV critic and Doctor Who fan Scott Bryan. Quote, "It was a real surprise. I think Billie Piper is fantastic. She was one of the reasons why the 2005 series landed so well, and led to 20 years of a hugely successful show and a reboot. But a surprise nonetheless. I'm intrigued by what they decide to do with her. The fact that there's mysteries around the fact that we don't know whether she's playing the Doctor, it's a bit open-ended," end quote. And that leads to this idea that she might not actually be the Doctor, because at the very end of the show, the beginning of the credits credit Jodie Whittaker, who I guess appears in this season finale. The credits identify Jodie Whittaker and Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, but then then following that, it just simply says introducing Billie Piper. So IGN notes that Gatwa's Doctor was the result of something new to the series called Bi-Generation, allowing both him and Tennant's Doctor to exist simultaneously. David Tennant's Doctor to exist simultaneously. And this IGN article citing one fan, which if I was a fan, and IGN quotes me in an article from like a post I made at Reddit, but they don't link to my post or they don't identify my username, I'd be pissed off. Because they don't do that. So I have no idea. I can't credit this person, unfortunately. But this IGN article cites one fan saying, quote, "I don't think the writers themselves know who Billie is playing. It seems like such a last moment decision to cast her that was only done to avoid having an open-ended regeneration. So she could be the Doctor. She could also not be. I don't think they've decided yet." End quote. And that's really telling, right? Like, and I think we've seen a lot of that in at least Hollywood, right? With like the Star Wars franchise of kind of like building the track as you go, right? What's the expression with like a train, right? Like this might just kind of be like something they're doing. So there's big headlines and someone like me, I know they're thinking, we got to get on Notes on the News. How can we make a big splash so Peter talks about us? So that they've succeeded, but now that you kind of have to like pay the piper, right? No pun intended. I was not planning that. You have to pay the piper, and ultimately, it might be a bill that you can't pay. You wrote you wrote a check that your creative ideas can't cash, right? So again, it raises this larger question: is Doctor Who creatively bankrupt? Right? It was so novel when it was brought back because, almost 20 years had passed since the original set of the show had ended. Advances in VFX obviously was a major factor. But has it kind of run its course again, right? The series has always been uneven in terms of its quality, but from my understanding, it's gotten worse in the last decade. I stopped once Peter Capaldi came on the air, and it's for such a stupid reason, because I watched the 9th, 10th, and 11th Doctor on Netflix, and obviously I can have subtitles, right? But I caught up right as Peter Capaldi started. So I was watching it on live TV, like with DVR. And this was like whatever year that was, 2012 or 2013. So or 2014 even. And I don't know if it was even possible back then, but even if it was, I didn't know how to do it. There was no subtitles on like these DVR recordings of these episodes. So I just couldn't understand what anyone was saying, particularly Peter Capaldi. So I just stopped watching it. Because I just couldn't understand what anyone was saying. So I've not really watched it since then. But even from my cursory understanding, the quality of the show has kind of gone downhill. Even starting with like the Matt Smith days, once Russell T Davies comes on board, right? Billie Piper is a great actress, but the choice even if she does end up being the Doctor, the choice feels like nostalgia bait more than anything. And Brian, what was his name? Scott Bryan, who I had a quote from before, also said, quote, "I think it felt a bit like towards the end of the episode, a pitch to Disney to say, hi, please renew us. We've got Billie Piper," end quote. So, it might be like they're kind of like Hail Mary pass to maintain or convince BBC and Disney of the show's relevancy and popularity. But it remains, again, the reaction, I've not really seen much reaction of people being like, this is like this is like the best reactions are, well, I mean, I like Billie Piper, but I'm very confused why they're doing this. So it still remains to be seen how this is all going to play out. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 5. So Kevin Costner, one of my favorite actors. So this is really disappointing to say. Kevin Costner and his production companies behind his film Horizon and American Saga, the multi-part film series, they are being sued by the stunt performer of the second installment due to an unscripted rape scene, right? So trigger warning on this if that's something that is going to be uncomfortable for you, right? The stunt performer in question, pictured here, Devin LaBella, saying, quote, "On that day, I was left exposed, unprotected, and deeply betrayed by a system that promised safety and professionalism. What happened to me shattered my trust and forever changed how I move through this industry," end quote. Officially, she's suing them for sexual discrimination, harassment, and the creation of a hostile work environment. In response to this, Costner's lawyer, Marty Singer, said, quote, "Kevin always wants to make sure that everyone is comfortable working on his films and takes safety on set very seriously. However, this claim by Devin LaBella has absolutely no merit and is completely contradicted by her own actions. And the facts, Miss LaBella is a serial accuser of people in the entertainment industry and has worked with the same lawyer on past claims. But those shakedown tactics won't work in this case," end quote. So, of course, like I mentioned, this is all related to Horizon and American Saga. This is an epic Western film series. The hope is for it to be a franchise, but as of right now, we only have the one movie. I think the second film premiered recently at Venice. This is written, directed, and produced by Kevin Costner, who also stars in the film. And the first film was released last year, like kind of around this time, actually, I think, like early summer. And it was released to mixed reception and even worse box office. So the second film, which has already been shot and it was supposed to release in August, it was supposed to release just a couple months after the first one, was delayed indefinitely. And I think now it's supposed to be coming out this year, but I mean, we're about halfway through the year and we still don't have like a release date for that. So the event in question that these accusations are related to is related to events on May 2nd, 2023. So when they were filming parts of the second installment, even though they were kind of filming both at the same time. So it was all part of this one mega production. So LaBella claims that she was forced to double for one of the main actresses, Ella Hunt, in an unscripted rape scene without proper notice of or the presence of a contractually necessary intimacy coordinator as part of SAG's contract rules, right? Ella Hunt was also upset. So apparently there was a scripted rape scene that they had filmed the day before, but then the next day, they came up with this other scene with a different male character sexually assaulting Ella Hunt's character. Ella Hunt was very taken aback and upset by this, and refused to participate in the filming of this scene. So they brought LaBella in, and Costner allegedly called for the male actor Roger Ivins to simulate non-consensual sex with Hunt's character, who in this was being portrayed or being played by LaBella. Again, there was no real prior notice. She kind of agreed to it, just kind of because of it would be awkward to say no, and you know, she's obviously talking to Kevin Costner. You're not gonna say no to Kevin Costner. And there was no intimacy coordinator present, despite their needing to be one per the contract. So that was an issue in and of itself. And then she faced retaliation after reporting the incident, right? After reporting it, she wasn't asked back for further work on the film series and almost kind of got blackballed in the stunt work community. And her career came to a quote-unquote abrupt halt, with the lawsuit outlining, quote, "The workplace and stunt work in general, which was once a source of purpose and fulfillment, is now a place of heightened apprehension, and the whole experience has left Miss LaBella feeling disposable and worthless. The impact of this impromptu work demand on Miss LaBella has been profound, not only upending a career Miss LaBella spent years building, but leaving her with permanent trauma that she will be required to address for years to come," end quote. Because again, like, it's uncomfortable to have someone, even if it's just simulated, to have someone on top of you simulating rape. Especially if you were not prepared for it, you weren't walked through it by an intimacy coordinator, and this is why intimacy coordinators are so important, right? Imagine if it was a fight scene. We would never allow a fight scene to be unchoreographed. because the actors are like, oh, it'll just feel more natural that way if we just do it. No! Like, that's what people say about, like, intimate scenes or sex scenes. Like, oh, like, that would ruin the magic. It's like, no, your job as the actor is to bring the magic. It's all fake. So, like, get a grip, work with an industry coordinator, practice beforehand, rehearse what you're going to do, right? These sexual and intimate scenes, especially if they're depicting sexual violence, should always be rehearsed and cleared with the participants in those scenes. Because you might consciously know it's a scene, but your body doesn't know that. It might react. It might, develop trauma because you're being raped, even if you're not actually being raped, right? LaBella's attorney, James A. Vanini, I think is how you say his last name. Sorry, James. Said, quote, this suit is filed not only for the damages plaintiff has sustained, but to address the continued failures at the highest levels of Hollywood production companies to comprehend and address the impacts of performing in sexually explicit and violent scenes and the need for intimacy coordination, end quote. So, according to Costner's lawyer, that that LaBella is a serial accuser and just makes stuff up. But I mean, again, I tend to believe women in these scenarios. Because just because they're saying yes doesn't mean that they're not being coerced or they don't feel like they're being pressured, right? And you as the man, or in this case, the producer, the director, like you should know not to you shouldn't have put her in a situation where she would have to decide if she's going to agree to it or not. You should never have asked her or you never should have put her in that situation in the first place. So, again, this is really disappointing because I really like Kevin Costner, and he seems like, all things considered, like a good dude. And when I first saw these headlines, I was like, did Kevin Costner sexually assault someone? So, I'm at least glad it's not something like that, but it's still not a good look, and it's really not good. And hopefully we get to the truth. The truth comes out about this, because no one should ever be in a situation like this. Okay, so that basically wraps up the show. Just want to give one final plug to CinemaQ. So it's not just a YouTube channel. Started as and still is a Substack newsletter where we publish written reviews for new movies coming out. You can find the link to that in the description down below. You can also just go to your browser and type in cinemancuso.substack.com. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please like this video. It really, really helps with engagement and the algorithm and people find the channel. So if you haven't found the channel, why not subscribe? I'm trying to grow this community the best I can so that maybe one day people will be fighting with me to buy the master rights to my videos. But that's probably a long ways away. So until next time, peace out.